but let's get to it.
All right, let's do it.
Watts Bar. Tell us about it.
Watts Bar, I mean, it's a really large reservoir. It's over 39,000 acres. It's the second largest in the state. It's about 72 miles long from Watts Bar Dam to Fort Loudon Dam. Deep areas, shallow areas, a lot of different kinds of habitat. So it has a lot to offer. Striped bass have been stocking them here since about 1964, and that was a really unique endeavor in itself. A lot of people still are coming from out of state fishing for the striped bass. A lot of guides come here, but it also has a really consistent bass fishery. One thing that we're doing since 2015, we're stocking Florida bass, and we did that on the next reservoir down in Chickamauga. We started in the year 2000, so it's got about a 15-year jump on it. We've seen great success there. Watts Bar has the key ingredients it needs to pull that off, and it's about time to see that. Another thing is the walleye that we started in 2011. I had always wanted to do that. Sauger were really hard to gather in the spring a lot of times for our hatcheries, and they're just really hard getting their survival back into the reservoir. So walleye live longer, they get bigger, they're a better year-round fishery. So we started that in 2011, and now in all of Region 3, because of the success here, we're stocking those, and we really have positive feedback and success from our anglers, and they really, really like it. So it's become, for a lot of people, almost a year-round adventure, and some of the fishing guides stay booked up for the first 6 months of the year for walleye trips from people all over the nation now to come and fish our reservoirs.
Awesome.
Won't you take me back to Tennessee?
The award-winning Tennessee Wildcast is on the air with the latest info about hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. This year, we celebrate the men and women of the TWRA responsible for 75 years of wildlife conservation. Now make welcome your host, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee Wildcast. We're glad you're tuning in. Thanks for watching, for listening. We got a great show lined up for you today. We're back at Watts Bar Reservoir, and we're here with Mike Jolley today. So I'm excited, man.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it is a beautiful location, and we are with Mike Watts Bar Jolley.
Oh, is that his nickname?
Yeah, new nickname. Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Middle name Watts Bar.
Yeah, pretty authentic, huh?
I'm excited to just talk about this reservoir today, learn about what we're seeing behind us here, and it's always fun when Mike's with us.
I appreciate that.
So
I always
knowledgeable.
enjoy it too.
Yeah. Thanks,
appreciate
Mike.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, Mimi hollered, gave me a call and said, "Hey, we need to get this one on the book." So I'm excited to do it. So anyway, it's going to be fun, and we're going to learn a lot today. But is there any current events going on, we need to know about?
Well, we're not too far out from free fishing day.
That's true. Yep. Free fishing day will be June 8th this year, so mark that on your calendars. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of that today. So we'll get to all that. But Mike, tell us what's been going on in your world, and kind of give folks a little update. I know you've been on the show multiple times, but yeah, update folks on who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm the Region 3 Reservoir Fisheries Manager, and I've got over 30 years in now, and I've always been in the...
You're not leaving us, are you?
No.
Okay.
Always been in the reservoir crew, and started out as a part-time technician, and just worked my way up and got the experience of working under people that had really put some initial stages of fish management together on these reservoirs. So I got to learn not only from textbook in school, but also from the people that were managing these, and they're really pioneers, of that. So yeah, I enjoy it great. In Region 3, we've got 9 reservoirs, about 150,000 acres of water, and Watts Bar being one of those.
Yeah.
Along with that, I know your education, which is phenomenal, and his knowledge level is over the top.
You're too nice.
Add to it that he grew up here hunting and fishing with his dad, who we love and would invite on the show.
Yes, anytime. He's welcome.
And that relationship you had with your dad in the outdoors on these waters, in these woods, is just amazing to me, and I absolutely love it. And I know that is literally threaded through every day of your work.
It really is, and it's just as I look around at the setting today, I can see places that we fished together. We fished a lot of streams, which, the backdrop here, kind of where the valley floor meets the escarpment, there's a lot of streams that flow into Watts Bar, and that was pretty much every weekend. we did that and enjoyed it and created the passion I have for fisheries, and fortunate enough to get to work with that today. So really neat.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very
love
cool.
that.
Well, for the folks watching,
Sure.
Remind them where we are right here. What's behind us?
So we're on the lower end of Watts Bar Reservoir, and this is the escarpment here. You get up onto the plateau, and of course the valley here being Tennessee River impoundment that Watts Bar is on, and the town of Spring City is here behind us. And speaking of fishing rodeos, that's where we have ours for this, one of the ones for this region, but the one that we have in a reservoir. And just a beautiful spot. I mean, it really is. Of all the places we travel in Region 3, and there are many beautiful places, but the backdrop here is always impressive to me and others that always see it for the first time, really taken back by it. So it's a nice area.
Yeah.
Let's spend a second on that. So the Bobby Wilson Free Fishing Day is June 8th this year, but tell us about the Chuck Copeland event that takes place here in Spring City on the Bobby Wilson Free Fishing Day.
Yeah.
Sure will. So Chuck Copeland was one of the guys I was talking about, who was my former supervisor when I started part-time, and he had a great big heart for the fishing rodeo, and the city, Spring City, had actually kind of created a fishing rodeo with some internships they had with some people, and then we went in and really tried to help that and grew it, and Chuck was always a major part of that, and gosh, that's been in the late 90s, when we really got active with that, and for several years, it was the largest one in the state. We would have 500 to 650 kids annually when we would have it. It was a good family event. It still is. It's changed a little bit over time, but still a lot of people would make their vacation here and everything. So just a really good setting. Spring City Veterans Park here behind us is where we have it. So it's a perfect place to stock the catfish and really get to introduce those kids to fishing.
Yeah, and you've expanded it in some ways. People can learn to cast. They can meet professional anglers. They learn about aquatic nuisance species at that event and so much more.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, because we really have tried to grow it into an educational program.
Yes.
Maybe a single parent that hasn't fished, and we try to teach them about tying the hook on, what lures to use and all those things, and hopefully get them, back to interested in going fishing after the event sometime and being able to do it successfully.
Yeah, and the folks meet a lot of our guys, our guys and gals that work on the grounds and are out there helping the fish or helping the wildlife, whatever they may be doing. But we got a lot of volunteers to the agency that put boots on the ground there.
That's for sure. And the volunteers, really, all the volunteers really make that event what it is. And we've seen that, Jason. That a lot of people come up and thank us for what we do, and they have questions about different things. But it's a good time for interaction with our public too.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. And I know the folks really appreciate it.
Yeah,
they do.
Fun event. So that'll take place on Watts Bar here in Spring City. People can check Go Outdoors Tennessee for other locations across the state and events across the state.
Yep.
But let's get to it.
All right, let's do it.
Watts Bar. Tell us about it. Tell us about Watts Bar. I know you have a ton of information.
Well, yeah, and Watts Bar, it's a really large reservoir. It's over 39,000 acres. It's the second largest in the state. It was actually completed in 1942, and it was completed just a few weeks after actually Pearl Harbor happened.
Oh, wow.
And so the power that was generated through Watts Bar Dam was used in Oak Ridge and some different areas. It's about 72 miles long from Watts Bar Dam to Fort Loudon Dam, and it has 722 miles of shoreline. So it's got some really big areas. It's very versatile, deep areas, shallow areas, a lot of different kinds of habitat. So it has a lot to offer for different interests.
Many species of fish that you guys are working to
really
make sure are healthy for the public to enjoy.
Yeah.
And what is it known for? Is it known for crappie, or could you point to one thing that it's known for?
Well, one thing, it's almost happened through time. So back in the 80s, it was really known for crappie, and people from a lot of states other than Tennessee would come into Watts Bar and catch crappie. There wasn't any size or krill limits. They were filling coolers up, and some of the estimated harvest for crappie in those years in the middle 80s was over 650,000 crappie taken out each year. So,
holy cow.
in the 90s, there were some regs and stuff that were instituted with that, but also striped bass. It's really been stocking them here since about 1964, and that was a really unique endeavor in itself. And a lot of people still are coming from out of state fishing for the striped bass. A lot of guides come here, but it also has a really consistent bass fishery, when we look at our data. And then we may talk about it in a little bit, but most recently will be our walleye, and I'm really, excited about that we started in 2011.
Let's go back to that number. So here I am saying, "Holy cow!" Did that number of crappie even put a dent? When you think about the size of this reservoir,
Yeah.
Does that number, when people hear a couple thousand, it kind of gets them excited, like, "Oh, that's a lot of fish." Is that a lot of fish?
When we look at data back then, that was a bump up. When we looked at it through our creel surveys that interviewed people, and how many fish are you keeping today and different things. So it does stand out looking back over time, but I think when you couple that with a reservoir that as they get older, they're less productive, and habitat, you lose some of that. And the crappie population hasn't been to that level that I've saw, but it's still been a consistent crappie population. But for the people that remember those days, and even some since, they wonder why it's not like that still, here. So.
And just to clarify, the fish doesn't become less productive. It's the reservoir becoming less productive as the reservoir. You've taught me that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you helped remind me that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, let's jump back just a hair. Growing up, what were you chasing out here? I know you were fishing these waters.
I was fishing them hard, and I may or may not have laid out of school a few times and waited around the banks in late March, early April when the crappie they're trying to do their thing. And it was mostly probably bass and crappie, and then the streams were different. But just in this embayment area here, I was very active in fishing. And then later on in the summer, would do trot lines for catfish and all kind of different endeavors there. But really figured out where the smallmouth stayed and where the crappie were going to be in the spawn, and I was there to meet and greet them each year when that happened. So.
That's great.
How kind.
yeah, they were good participants too.
And I'm going to skip back even further, because earlier Mike and I were chatting about Watts Bar, and he shared a little bit about the history of what's under Watts Bar.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And very fascinating.
Yeah, so we're actually at the Ray Springs Recreation Area today, and it's owned by TVA, managed by Ray County. But what's really neat here where we're at today is back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a spring here, and people would come from all over the nation because it was told to have healing powers, like a mineral spirit spring there. And people would come from all over. There was a big motel here, church, school. And when TVA bought the last of the properties in 1939, there was about 800 families here that had to relocate. So there was a whole town all around us here that people would come from all over and stay in this big motel. It was really, really something for its time to be that extravagant in this rural of a community, So
wow.
That's all here in this area, or was, So that's how it's got its name, Ray Springs, where we're at today. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
And Mike is really 150 years old, and it's that water.
Yeah, minerals. Yeah,
Mineral.
You've been dipped a few times.
Yeah, I did. I was thinking as I was saying that, I don't know if it has all the healing power they said it did. As much
I'm up for a swim afterwards. No, thanks for that, though. It's fascinating to know a little bit about that history of the land. And we're out on this pristine water. We have it around us today. We're fishing out of it. But it does have a history that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you'd share that with us. All right.
Before we get too deep into the fisheries management, though, I just want to remind people it's a great recreational body of water, too. We've seen boats come by as we're standing here. Be safe, wear your life jacket, know those boating rules and regs and navigation things. Just be safe out there.
Yeah.
Good point.
So
designated operator.
Yeah, don't drink and boat, and just it's getting warmer, so it's going to be a busy time out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, back to where we were. Where are we today? Is that where we're at? What question are we on now, Mimi?
Well, we want to know about the history, and I was curious about how have you seen this body of water change from the time you were a child to today? And you've hit on that with the reservoirs declining and losing productivity over time. But how have you seen it change? And then here you are over the management of fisheries in Watts Bar, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think as far as changes, there's been, it's been consistent. I would say that overall for the targeted species like bass and crappie, catfish, striped bass, and a lot of those are through TWRE's efforts of stocking with the striped bass. They wouldn't be here if we didn't stock them. So I guess one thing that's changed is maybe just some historical places that fish utilized has changed over time because of just the the degrading habitat, but also aquatic vegetation levels that kind of ebb and flow. Changes a little bit of those regimes. Fishing pressure, it's changed, and through time, we saw that through COVID. There was a lot more participation on the reservoirs, and that kind of can put more of a demand on populations as well. So that's been consistent, or even probably grown a little bit more as far as fishing pressure. But overall, things have been pretty consistent. I would say just as the reservoir's gotten older, that species of fish have kind of shifted with that and moved around in some different places, but nothing alarming going on, thankfully.
So I'm going to mention, well, you mentioned already, you touched on it, but tell us where we are with the management today, what your focus is, and how you decide on that management, because a lot of science goes into it.
It does. So we look at a lot of data. We look at, for example, 10-year trends for each species and kind of see if, something's trending down, if it needs attention now, or is it something we're watching. And a lot of those different species, react different to different things. And really, at the end of the day, we have two the big tools in our tool belt are through regulations and through stocking. So today, one thing that we're doing since 2015, and not only on Watts Bar, but some other Tennessee River impoundments, we're stocking Florida bass, and we did that on the next reservoir down in Chickamauga. We started in the year 2000, so it's got about a 15-year jump on it. We've seen great success there. Watts Bar has the key ingredients it needs to pull that off. It does have ample habitat for the bass, and it's got a really good forage base of shad, threadfin, and gizzard shad. So those things are in place here. We hope it takes off, and it's about time to see that. Another thing is the walleye that we started in 2011. I had always wanted to do that because sauger, it's very exciting. And sauger were really hard to gather in the spring a lot of times for our hatcheries, and they're just really hard to just getting their survival back into the reservoir. So walleye live longer, they get bigger, they're a better year-round fishery. So we've started that in 2011, and now in all of Region 3, because of the success here, we're stocking those, and we really have really positive feedback and success from our anglers, and they really, really like it. So it's become, for a lot of people, almost a year-round adventure. And some of the fishing guides that I talk to stay booked up for the first 6 months of the year for walleye trips from people all over the nation now to come and fish our reservoirs.
Awesome, yeah.
So I have to back up and clarify something again. So it's just not that you're hearing good things, but all the data that you collect. Tell us about that data that you're collecting that reflects the success of what Fisheries has introduced.
Yeah, thank you. So just for this week example, we're out on Watts Bar doing our black bass electrofishing surveys, and we'll take that and look at how many we collect per hour, the size of the fish that we're collecting, we'll get weights off of them, which puts it into a formula that gives us the overall condition and health of the fish. And we look at all those things. And when we look at that, and I have and do, we seek a lot of consistency there. So things look good. And for crappie as well, we look at the spawning success in the fall through trap net surveys on Watts Bar. And they've been struggling a bit, the crappie, on getting some reproduction. And it's probably because of lake levels that aren't stable in the spring like they need to be, because reservoirs were not built for fisheries, right? Mm-hmm. So recreation's down on the list. It's more for power and flood control, but because of those regimes of the operating authorities, it's not always conducive in the spring for good spawning success. So we have different methods. We use gill nets also to collect maybe things like striped bass, or again electrofishing, and get lengths and weights, and we put all that together and look at it and make a decision on that. But it also allows us to enables us to inform the public better. If they have a bad year fishing, or they're not seeing as many fish and they're concerned, we can lay out 10 years of data and show them that, and kind of what's upcoming, from the juvenile fish populations and things like that.
That's what I think is fascinating. It just doesn't take place over 1 year. It's 10 years of data that's determining future effort.
Yes.
Wow.
You're going to see those trends in the numbers.
Right. You're going to be here about another 50 years. You're gonna...
Yeah, only because of these healing powers of the spring.
Yeah.
So we are seeing people come from near and far, and I'm sure that poses some kind of challenge, but and you've touched on a little bit, what are the challenges of managing such a large reservoir?
Yeah, there are many because just one, like you said, just because of its size, it is hard to get around. I think one of the greatest challenges is the perceptions, a lot of time of what the public thinks is going on with the fishery versus the reality of what the data and the science and the fisheries population itself is telling us, and trying to balance, that. And with Watts Bar, it has seen some changes. I mean, in the 80s, we also zebra mussels, so there's more of a water clarity. So what used to be a predominantly white crappie fishery, because they do a little bit better and prefer more turbid water, as the water cleared up, the black crappie became the more dominant species. And they have a little different spawning regime. So different parts of the reservoir, now we're better or maybe worse because of the black crappie versus the white crappie kind of regime changing around. So a lot of things like that.
And the zebra mussel, sorry to interrupt,
yes.
Nuisance invasive species.
Yes. Yeah, and we've got aquatic vegetation that's ANS species, as well. And then, the Alabama bass, which is really taking down the smallmouth fishery here. We know that through genetic surveys that we've been doing the last few years. And as we collect what looks like a smallmouth, and then when we send it off for genetics, it's a contribution of Alabama and smallmouth. So they're hybridizing, which over time it just takes that population down. And that's the greatest threat. It's not even a threat to Watts Bar now. It's really happening in front of us.
Yeah, that's a gut punch.
And it is. And if people ask me, one of your earlier questions about as a child fishing here versus now, that one is hard to swallow right there. Yeah. Knowing that the smallmouth bass fishery here is really taking a hit because someone decided it would be a good idea to stock a fish that's not native here, which is an illegal act, by the way, stocking of public waters. And over time, it's really going to take down our smallmouth bass fishery.
Yeah, and that's something that can never be removed.
Removed.
That is a gut punch. Yeah. Ouch, which is why you're so great at educating on the reason to not move fish. Yeah. Even though it's illegal, you still take that make those huge educational efforts. Don't move Alabama bass.
Absolutely not.
It's going to take the genetics of what should be here out.
Yes.
Go look at our website, tnwildlife.org. There's pages out there about Alabama bass and why we don't want them and the reasons, and we lay it out there so people can understand.
Thank you.
The details are there, so go learn why.
I want to back up too, because I've joined you on this reservoir for this reason, but talk about a little bit about the fish attractor work and why that takes place.
Yeah, so we do a lot of fish attractor work, and with all the reservoirs we have, we try to get around every 5 years and redo our buoy sites. And as I noticed, we got a buoy, you can't see it for the trees, but there's one here behind us that we've got in a very good area for crappie and bass. And 2022 was the last year we were here, and all that's on the website too. It shows the sites that we put the materials in, and it gives the coordinates for it so you can go fish it. But we also do a lot of habitat enhancement on Watts Bar in areas that we stock fish, like the walleye and the Florida largemouth, and we also stock some crappie here as well, and striped bass. But we'll put some habitat in those stocking site areas to where it protects those juvenile fish until they can, get distributed out into the reservoir. So yeah, we're always actively working with habitat for sure.
Remind people what stocking fish look like.
Yeah, that's a good point.
People might say, "Oh, you're throwing some big bass in there." Well,
yeah, so most fish, no matter what the species, is what we call fingerling size, and it could be from 1 to 3 inches typically, for each species, and it just takes a lot of money to raise them bigger than that in the ponds. We don't have the pond space, and then if you've got walleye in a pond, they get really predacious on each other, cannibalistic toward each other, and you have to get them out into a reservoir after about 30 to 60 days max, on those. So
I have to tell a quick story. Were we on Chickamauga? It's when I first started with the agency, and I'm out with Mike and his crew, and they're stocking Florida largemouth fingerlings, and they're literally the size of a finger. And we met these 2 older gentlemen, and they said, "Boy, fishing's going to be good next year." And Mike graciously said, "Hey, give us a little bit of time here, fish grow."
Yeah, I remember that. Well, y'all brought up awesome points there, though, because it is, thankfully, a lot of fish we're stocking every year. So, we've got multiple year classes coming through. But yeah, just because you see it stocked this year doesn't mean next year, fishing is going to be incredible.
Need a little bit of time.
Great point. Yeah. Yeah, just a little bit.
So Mike, tell us some of the common questions you receive regarding Watts Bar. I think about you brought up vegetation. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, vegetation's a big one, and the homeowners, most of those don't want it out in front of their docks, and understandably so there. And then the fishermen really want it because in the late 80s here, there was a lot of vegetation in Watts Bar. And it pretty much just went away through the early 90s, and the bass populations went down with that some, just because it provided a lot of cover for it. So fishermen, they equate aquatic vegetation with the success of that. The other question I get a lot is about our Florida largemouth bass project. Like, hey, where's it at? Do you think it's going to work? And it's like, well, we started in 2015. It's getting close to time to start really expressing itself. And we have heard of a few over 10-pound caught on Watts Bar in the last couple of years.
Awesome.
Another question I get is about crappie, and that one's realistic because crappie have in our surveys for spawning in the fall, it shows some struggle there with them. And the only thing I can attribute it to now is the lake levels in the spring. In 08, TVA changed the filling regime, and it used to be full on April the 15th. So did all the other Tennessee River reservoirs in Region 3, and now it's May the 15th. So that's a critical time for crappie first and then bass when they're trying to spawn, and the water levels are changing. They're really not that stable full pool that they need. And I know on Watts Bar from our data on the 2 years in the last 20 years that crappie have exploded with a great spawning success. We're in flood year springs when the lake level got full and it had to stay full because they couldn't get drained out because there was so much water downstreams in the other impoundments, and they exploded in their spawn. So
well, that's cool to know. I mean, that's good knowledge there.
Yeah, and we can predict it from our trap net surveys and be like, hey, they got a good spawn this year. In 3 years, they're usually 10 inches, that krillable size. Like in 3 years, it should be really good.
And folks can visit TVA's website to find out about their vegetation control methods.
Yeah, great point. So TWRA does not manage or control, anything about aquatic vegetation. It's to each operating authority, and for Watts Bar, that's TVA. So they can go to their website, and get more information on that.
Wow. A lot of information.
Yeah, definitely.
And have we covered everything about your habitat and data collection? I know those are big points, and people can go and visit. They know where to drop a line in, where that habitat is.
Yeah, they can. And I would add to our data, krill surveys that we do. And we just did one on Watts Bar. They do a great job. And these are done across the state in different reservoirs. And did one last year on Watts Bar. It's for the whole year. And we actually interview anglers and get to talk to them about what they've caught. We also get to ask them questions about just their overall opinion of our management of the reservoir.
They're not writing tickets. Talk to them.
Right, exactly.
They're not writing tickets.
They're not there to check licenses or anything.
And they're so nice.
So nice. I got a really good crew. And you talk about all the reservoirs we manage. I mean, if I didn't have a good crew, I'd be in trouble. We all would. So I've got a really good crew, and the krill clerks are part of that. So, some really good data there. But Mimi, there's probably even some more data, just looking at it, boiling it down, looking at it different ways. There's a lot of time spent just evaluating the data we collect and looking at stocking regimes that we do, regulations. Do we need to be changing something here? But based on trends and stuff.
All right, let's kick out the new questions.
All right.
What's challenging about your job, and what do you love about your job?
I think challenging is trying to get the public educated. A lot of times, it's a little bit, I said earlier about it, but to the science and the data that we have. Just because fishing's bad doesn't mean there's always a problem out there, and just because it's good this year doesn't mean it's going to be good forever either. Things change. What I love about it is growing up being passionate about fishing and actually getting to work in that now. I kind of, the analogy I would have is like playing your favorite sport, and then one day you're the coach, of that sport. And so that's what it feels
Great
like.
Analogy.
And I just really love that. Really blessed and thankful, to have that opportunity to do it, and people along the way that have really imputed into me and I've learned from, and getting to work with great people, So that's what I love about it.
Very
Awesome.
cool.
Thanks
Yeah.
for being here.
Yeah, thank
A
y'all.
lot of
man.
laughs today, too.
Y'all had
Thanks,
great
Jason.
questions.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Mike.
I appreciate it. Thank
No,
you so much.
we love working with you as well. It's always fun hanging out
Yeah,
with you here.
I appreciate that.
We'll have to do it more often.
Yes, we will.
Keep it going.
A few more reservoirs to cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mimi, for lining all that up. And I know people want to learn about these reservoirs, and we're going to try to hit as many as we can, and especially in this region and others.
Yeah.
So stay with us. Keep
Thank
coming
you.
back.
Great.
This is Tennessee Wildcast. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. Join us as we celebrate 75 years of conservation in our great state. You can invest in Tennessee's wildlife future by purchasing a license at GoOutdoorsTennessee.com. That's GoOutdoorsTennessee.com.